The wind off the King's Road carried the scent of wet iron and pine into Winterfell's courtyard, stirring banners the color of wolf pelts at dusk. Theon Greyjoy paused beneath the first snowflakes of the season, head cocked, eyes half closed, letting the hush settle on his shoulders. It was the quiet he'd once feared as a boy. Now it felt like the only language the North spoke honestly. 7 years he had been fostered here, long enough that the stone of the keep seemed to have leached into his bones, until he could name each weather-cracked gargoyle on the battlements as readily as any Stark. He drew a slow breath. Chainmail rasped beneath the leather jerkin Robb had insisted he wear, direwolf sigil sewn at the breast. Where Theon's own kraken might have rested were the world simpler. That sigil was weightier than the steel. To most Southerners he was still hostage more than friend, yet the wolves called him brother, and he would not betray that call. Footfalls on the flagstones. Robb Stark emerged from the armory archway, red hair dark with sweat. A loose cloak fluttered behind him, clasped by silver jaws. "You'll freeze, standing about like a statue," Robb said, wiping his brow with the back of a gloved hand. Theon laughed softly. "A Greyjoy never freezes. Salt in the blood, snow on the lashes, makes a finer man." His grin felt natural now, no mask at all. Robb rolled his shoulders. The weight of lordship new and raw since the Raven from King's Landing had named Eddard Stark a traitor. "Maester Luwin wants us," he said, voice thick with something Theon recognized as dread. They crossed the yard together, boots crunching on crystalline rime, neither speaking. The heart tree's branches scratched at a gray sky. Somewhere nearby Arya's laughter rose shrill as a sparrow before cutting off sharply. Catelyn's gentle rebuke muffled the rest. All Winterfell seemed to draw a single breath, waiting to know whether it must bare its fangs. Inside the solar, Maester Luwin adjusted parchment beneath a sphere of dimming candlelight. Bran sat rigid in a carved high-back chair, small hands clenched upon the arms. Catelyn stood behind him, fingers kneading the boy's shoulders. Her eyes lifted when Robb entered, but lingered on Theon a heartbeat longer, measuring, perhaps, whether the iron-born youth truly belonged in moments such as these. Luwin cleared his throat. "Lord Tywin musters at Harrenhal, a hammer poised above the trident. Riverrun is besieged." The maester's chain links glinted dull pewter. "We've ravens from White Harbor, Barrowton, the last hearth. Banners gather, but they look to Winterfell for the word." Robb's jaw tensed. "Then we march." Silence pooled. Bran looked a question at his mother, who answered with a barely perceptible nod. Theon stepped forward before he could think better of it. "And I will ride beside you. Your father, my father in everything but name, entrusted you with his north. You'll have me, sword and counsel alike." Robb's smile was brief, fierce. "I never doubted it." They left Winterfell beneath a sky rubbed raw to slate, 1,000 strong. Horns echoed across the wolfswood, announcing wolves beyond count. Theon rode near Robb's standard, a direwolf stitched in gray thread so dark it seemed carved from shadow. Marching men looked to it with the hunger of those who believed the thing sown there might leap free to bite their enemies. When night camp wove ember constellations along the road, Theon paced between fires, offering jests that drew laughter even from grim Karstarks and Umber men. Yet each smile cost him. He felt the black tide of the Iron Islands tugging at his heart, whispering of krakens lost in northern snows. On the 7th evening, Robb summoned him to the Lord's tent, where a rough map lay weighed by daggers. Riverland's houses, flayed by war, cluttered parchment in crimson ink. "The Isles may choose this moment to raid the western shore," Robb said, tapping the coastline. "Balon Greyjoy bows to no king. My lord father bows to storms and salt alone," Theon conceded. "But he respects strength. Send me Robb. I'll sail to Pike and bind him to our cause before he can dream of carving out his own." Catelyn, seated opposite, eyed Theon as though he'd offered a blade rather than aid. "Balon lost 2 sons to King Robert's wrath," she reminded. "Will he spill more blood beneath the wolf banner?" Theon met her gaze steadily. "He'll hear truth from me, that the Isles gain more by friendship than by fire. If I fail, I'll die reminding him whose ward I've been. Robb looked as though the weight of command might crush him, yet he nodded. Take the black wind. Go swiftly. Return swifter. Salt spray baptized him again off the bow of the black wind, but the taste was not home, only memory. Pike's broken towers speared the horizon like fingers of a drowned god clawing skyward, and beneath them Theon felt years of buried want churn. Yet he held fast to Winterfell's oath. Balon Greyjoy's hall smelt of kelp, tar, and stubborn pride. The Iron King, crown of rusted swords upon salt-tangled hair, regarded his long-lost son with eyes colder than any northern winter. 7 years you fetched and carried for wolves, Balon growled. You wear their sigil, not ours. Speak quickly. I weary of betrayals. Theon's voice did not tremble. I have never ceased being of the Iron Islands, he said, words loud enough to hush the hall. But I have learned honor in the north, honor we might wield, not mimic. Robb Stark rides south with 30,000 swords. Stand with him, father, and the Kraken need no longer cower on rocky shores. The Freys, the Westerlings, minor houses already weigh their allegiances. Claim lordship of the northern coast as ally, not foe. Asha Greyjoy lounged beside the salt throne, one brow arched, smile sharp as a boarding axe. You ask us to bend the knee to a boy. To bend none, Theon countered. To clasp hands, raid under banners seen as saviors, not scourge. The Lannisters choke the seas with gold. But what is gold to an Ironborn's freedom? We strike where they hoard, we share spoils with the north, and when victory is won the coastline from Cape Kraken to the Fever River is ours by right. Balon rose, cloak swaying like dark tide. You talk of sharing, as if the drowned god preached charity. He stepped closer until Theon caught the smell of brine and old parchment. You forgot our words. We do not sow stark seed has grown in your belly. I'll not have it. Theon stood his ground. Then remember another truth, father. Iron rusts or it reforges. Refuse alliance and the north will come as storm instead of friend. You will face wolves, lions, storms alike, with reefs for support. Balon's laugh was low, rust-edged. Let them come. He gestured to guards. Take my son to a chamber. He'll remain until his identity sees sense. Chains closed round Theon's wrists. He did not resist. Better to bide time than bleed honor into Balon's sand-strewn hall. As he was led away, he caught Asha's gaze again. Something unreadable flickered there before she turned to pour herself wine. 3 nights in a tower cell high above writhing surf clarified purpose. Theon pressed ear to the narrow arrow slit, hearing gulls cry like ghosts. He pictured Robb beneath banners of frost, trusting him. Loyalty was not a shackle. It was a sword, one he would wield even in chains. On the 4th night Asha visited, lantern-casting copper arcs across stone. Father thinks to trade you for a Lannister pardon should the tide turn, she murmured, setting a crust of bread beside him. But I think you'd rather drown than serve Casterly Rock. Theon lifted shackled hands. I need only one key. The word of my sister. Asha leaned against the wall, eyes like gleaming driftwood. You would steal ships, sail them north under stark colors, burn your own homeland's fleet if it threatened Winterfell. True, true, she laughed softly. Then we are kin indeed, born saboteurs. Balon's war dream stinks of seabird rot. I'll not sink with him. She drew a thin tool from her boot, touched it to the lock. Metal clicked. Night tide in 2 hours. The Leviathan's crew are still mine. Meet me at the east stairs. When stars drowned in cloud, they moved like shadows through gut paths between towers. Asha led him past drunk guards into a cove where a sleek longship waited, sails furled. By dawn they were cutting seawater northward, a storm at their heels and 8 ships following, crewed by Ironborn whose allegiance lay with adventure over stubborn kings. It was dark noon at Moat Cailin when Theon found Robb again. The young wolf's camp bristled with rumors. A fleet of krakens sailing in stark peace. Men reached for swords at the first sight of the Leviathan's banner until Theon strode across the causeway, cloak torn by salt winds, eyes bright. Robb dismounted so quickly his sword belt clattered. They embraced, armor clanging between. I feared you lost. I am harder to lose than keys to a Lannister vault. Theon stepped back, gesturing to the arriving longships. These crews answer to me and to you should you have them. They'll raid Lannisport this fortnight, bleeding the lion's coffers. Asha commands with honor. Catelyn stared, astonished, as Asha Greyjoy bowed with a performer's flourish. A pleasure, Lady Stark. I bring 36 longships, all filled with men who prefer loot to oaths but will follow my brother's word for now. Robb's grin was a dawn breaking. The sea itself seems to favor us. Only then did Theon allow himself a breath. He had severed a coil binding him to the Iron Islands, but forged another chain of his own choosing, one he swore would never snap. Fires of war bloomed across the map through summer and into a red autumn. Jaime Lannister fell at Whispering Wood, gold armor stripped and hauled into a Riverrun cell. Robb's host howled victory, yet the road ahead twisted. Tywin Lannister's armies battered the Riverlands. King Renly's banners cast long shadows from the south. With each raven's warning, Robb's war council grew more fractious. Karstark's baying for vengeance, Frey's murmuring tolls of marriage. Theon's counsel proved steel between quarrels. He spoke not with the easy arrogance he had once favored, but with calm drawn from Winterfell's godswood. When Lord Rickard Karstark demanded Jaime's head for his son's deaths, Theon offered an alternative, a quiet threat. Hold the Kingslayer alive, the lion is caged, and Tywin's roars waste strength. Slay him and you free the beast. At night Theon visited the cells. Jaime lounged against straw, chains rattling as he lifted a brow. Ah, the Kraken-Wolf hybrid, he quipped. Does it sting, being neither thing entire? Theon smiled mirthlessly. Stings less than losing a hand, will Kingslayer. Keep your wit honed. You may need it when the Starks bargain your life coin by coin. Jaime's grin faltered a fraction, and Theon left satisfied. Winter's first true storm struck at the fords of the Trident, sheets of ice slush lashing tents. Scouts reported Tywin encamped across the river, waiting for supplies that still rode from Lannisport. Supplies Asha's raiders now intercepted, burning wagons along the coast. Robb stood beneath his war banner, pale torchlight painting hollows beneath his cheeks. We cannot meet Lord Tywin's main force here. Rivers too wide, currents treacherous. Theon knelt beside the map, tracing with a gauntlet finger. But a sea attack could harry his rear. Let me take the Leviathan and 3 swift longships up the Trident at night. We slip past his camps, fire stores, cut bridge ropes. When dawn comes he'll find the river wields teeth. Catelyn frowned. The river's flooded, banks near impassable. Exactly, Theon said. No one expects raiders on a flood. Robb clasped Theon's shoulder. Do it. They rode beneath moonless sky, oars muffled in sealskin. River reeds whipped against hulls. Marsh gas glimmered fox green. Rain hammered helms so hard it stung. Yet when they slid onto muddy banks behind Tywin's supply tents, the sentries lay sleepy, half-sheltered by cloak hoods. Ironborn moved like knives through silk. By torchlight Theon watched granaries burst into pillars of flame, and for one mad instant he felt the rush of an old Reaver song. But he silenced it, turning instead to cut the last rope anchoring a pontoon bridge. Timbers groaned. River current seized the structure, carrying it downstream. By dawn Tywin's men woke to blazing stores and a bridge vanishing round a bend. Cows bolted, pulling wagons into water. Horses screamed as flames licked feed stalls. Across the river Robb's host sounded war horns, a challenge Tywin could not meet without crossing. In Riverrun's great hall weeks later, Robb Stark was proclaimed king in the north. Lords beat sword pummels upon shield rims. Wolves carved of cedar stood sentinel. Amid thunderous cheers Theon watched Robb rise, crown of bronzed iron settling upon auburn hair. A hush fell when the new king lifted a hand. There is one among us, Robb said, who has shed blood and doubt alike, who crossed sea and storm to keep faith. He turned, beckoned. Theon Greyjoy, kneel. Theon's breath caught. He stepped forward, heart drumming like hull against wave. Kneeling, he felt the cold rush of reality. A hostage boy from Pike being honored in the wolf's den. Robb laid sword point to each shoulder. In name of the old gods and the new, I name you Theon Stark, sworn brother of Winterfell and lord of the stony shore, so long as snow falls upon these lands. The hall erupted. Karstarks roared approval. Even the dour Glovers smiled. Theon rose, throat burning with a belonging he had never dared crave aloud. Word of Balon's fury reached them within a month. The Iron King had declared Theon dead to him, yet his fleet lay crippled by sabotage. Half his captains fled with Asha to sea. The north, for now, remained unthreatened from that quarter. Still, winter marched. Snow blanketed road and field, slowing armies to crawl. Tywin Lannister regrouped in the Westerlands. Renly and Stannis eyed one another across Storm's End. And somewhere in the far east a girl with dragon's blood kindled whispers of fire. Intents conjured from rough-spun wool. Theon drafted letters in Robb's name. Agreements of mutual raid and tribute with petty houses along the Sunset Sea. Promises of fair share rather than iron price. He sealed each with purple wax, imprinting a twin sigil. Direwolf above Kraken. Alliances forged like these, he believed, would outlast any single campaign. One dawn he found himself atop the ramparts of Riverrun, mist rising from the river below. Arya, slim and sharp as a new sword, stood beside him balancing on the balls of her feet. They say you could have taken Winterfell easy if you'd gone home and brought back Reavers, she said without preamble. I could have, Theon admitted. But what then? I'd sit a burned castle, counting ashes while ghosts howled. Arya sniffed. Good. I'd have had to kill you if you did. She flashed him a grin too large for her face, then bounded away. Watching her, Theon realized what loyalty meant. Roots grown from choices, not birth. He wondered if Balon would ever understand. Perhaps not. Some men chose stone over soil. But Theon was learning to bloom where he'd planted himself, even in cold northern earth. That winter's heart would bring darker trials. Betrayal from allies, red weddings, dire tidings from beyond the wall. But those nights were yet to be written. For now, fires crackled in Riverrun's yard, wolves and krakens sharing ale, and Theon Stark, born Greyjoy, forged anew. Let the snow fall on his upturned face, feeling neither cold nor doubt, only the steady beat of belonging thrumming like oars upon a calm, uncharted sea. The hush of Riverrun's winter evening was broken only by the lash of sleet against the shutters and the distant churn of the tumblestones swollen with meltwater. In a side chamber above the great hall, firelight rolled over rough beams, lending the room a copper glow that fluttered like a candle atop each man's thoughts. Theon Stark, born Greyjoy, though that surname now felt as brittle as shed scuts, stood with one boot braced upon a window ledge, staring into the storm. Outside, flakes skated sideways through torch haze, but beneath the glitter lay the restless dark of war. Distant campfires, picket horns, shapes moving on patrol. He tried to imagine the stillness of Pike's Cliffs at this hour, waves battering black stone, gulls crying, but memory felt thin, a tapestry left in rain. Robb paced beside a table strewn with half-damp maps. Every so often he'd pause, draw a breath as if to speak, then turn again, footsteps soft on rushes. Catelyn sat on a carven bench, sewing needle glinting, though her eyes seldom tracked the thread. Her mind was elsewhere, caught upon some spindle of grief. In the corner, gray wind dozed, flank rising in slow cadence. But a single yellow eye followed his master's path with lazy vigilance. At last Robb halted. A raven came from the twins, he said, voice slipping through the room like a drawn blade. Lord Walder demands we reaffirm the marriage pact. My own, Arya's, even Sansa's, before he marches his levies beyond his doorstep. Theon pushed from the ledge. Demands, he repeated, tasting the word. Walder Frey forgets that oaths can be asked in courtesy, not extorted. Catelyn's needle stilled. He forgets nothing. He remembers insult as others do seasons, she said. My father once told me the Frey banners fly only when the wind favors them. Robb exhaled, shoulders sinking. If I yield the pledge, I tether the North to a man who counts loyalty in coin. Yet if I refuse, Tywin gains days, weeks to recover. The Southron lords will see hesitation as weakness. Theon watched ice feather against the panes. Then we do not hesitate, he said. We reshape the game. Let me sail again, this time not to Pike, but to Seaguard. Lord Mallister still clings to the trident's mouth. Grant him our trust. Offer trade with the Isles under my banner. Greyjoy ships can run Lannister blockades. Bring grain upriver. Break the Frey monopoly on crossings. Walder demands your name. We answer with deeds instead. Robb's brow furrowed. Seaguard holds bitter memory of Ironborn raids. And they remember I broke with those raiders, Theon replied. Give me the words of your seal and the Mallisters will lend you osprey wings. Catelyn looked to her son, jaw set. Every risk draws blood, whether it spills or waits unseen. But better blood we choose than blood forced upon us. Robb nodded slowly, weariness smoldering behind blue eyes. Take 24 ships. Asha commands, you speak. Go before the moon turns. The Leviathan's prow carved froth as pale as driven snow. Storm clouds marched above, violet and bruised. Yet moonlight found spears of silver between their ranks, splitting sea spray into prisms. Theon stood at the rail, fingers cold to the bone, listening to the thrum of oars. Below deck, Ironborn sang low, a dirge from their fathers' fathers, every line ending in the promise of salt-wetted grave or glory. Once, such music had made his heart soar. Tonight it was merely reminder, ancestral heartbeat pulsing in a new-forged breast. Asha emerged from the hatch, cloak whipping. She leaned beside him, arms folded. Your raven said Mallister keeps 3 galleys at anchor, she said. I count at least 5 by lantern mark. Reinforcements from the Trident, most likely. Theon traced the harbor's outline. Watchfires crowned Seaguard's ramparts like a necklace of embers. If they believe us foe, those catapults on the booming tower will make DRI. Ftud of us before we tie off. Then speak swiftly. My men dislike being mistaken for targets. A signal horn blew, a deep note that quivered through timber. The Leviathan ran her colors up the mast. Split banner, dire wolf over kraken. Torches flared atop the nearest galley in answer. Silhouettes hurried along decks. Asha slipped a hand toward the axe at her belt in reflex, but Theon caught her wrist. Trust, he murmured. She snorted. Trust rusts faster than iron in seawater. Yet she let his grip fall, and together they watched as a smaller patrol boat peeled away from the Mallister line, sail furled, oars dipping. When it drew near, hail rang out. State your allegiance. Theon Stark, he called back, voice carrying across the black glass water. Sworn of Winterfell, envoy of King Robb, here at Lord Mallister's leave. Moments balanced like dice in the hand of some tight-lipped god. Then the reply came, he may grant audience. Advance under escort. Any false move and your ship burns. Asha grinned, teeth flashing. They play at Ironborn manners. They play at survival, Theon said, but the knot in his gut loosened. Within Seaguard's hall, tapestries stirred in window drafts, showing gull-white sails and naval victories stitched in tarnished thread. Lord Jason Mallister sat straight-backed, silver-shot hair clipped to soldier's discipline. His mailed hand rested on the eagle pommel of a sheathed sword. To either side, knights stood in half-armor, eyes sharp. Theon bowed. My lord, I bring offer of mutual relief. The north requires grain and a path south that does not wind through the twins alone. Your coffers require coin and allies not burdened by the lion's debt. I present both. Mallister's gaze flicked to Asha, who lounged, seemingly unconcerned, thumbs hooked into her belt. And what price do the Krakens levy today? He asked. Only the chance to prove their coin newly minted, Theon answered. Asha commands ships sworn to my word. They raid Lannister shores, not yours. Allow their sails to harbor at Seaguard, taxed at fair northern rates, and our holds empty grain and river trout instead of torch and iron. A hush rustled like grass over stone. Finally Mallister rose, stepped down from the dais until they stood near eye level. More than my own men have drowned at sea thanks to Greyjoy steel. I should string you from the gate as warning. Theon did not flinch. Many died when Robert's storm fell on Pike too, my brothers among them. Wolves taught me wounds forgive only when new flesh grows. Let us grow it here. Mallister studied him. The black hair grown long like northern scouts, the wolf and kraken clasp at his throat, the weather cut into his cheeks. At length he extended a hand. The port duties will match White Harbor's scale. Violate one plank of Seaguard's trust and I mount your heads on my wall. Agreed. Theon clasped forearms. Agreed. Asha tipped an invisible cap. Harbors make poor bonfires anyway. Mallister's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Years later, men would mark that meeting as hinge upon which the river war swung. Grain and smoked fish began slipping upriver by night, hidden beneath piles of kelp, guarded by sailors whose accents sounded of far waves but whose holds bore stark wax. The siege lines around river unthinned as Tywin diverted men to protect coastal estates from spectre raiders. And Walder Frey, hearing that bread no longer moved solely through his toll gates, found his leverage less stout. But victory, Theon learned, never descended whole. It dripped, patient as snowmelt, and sometimes froze before it reached thirsty soil. The raven arrived on a dawn the color of beaten lead. It perched upon the crossbeam of Robb's command tent, feathers dusted with frost, eyes bright as obsidian. When Theon slit the seal and unfurled the parchment, his heart clenched. King's Landing announces Eddard Stark's sentence carried out for treason this morrow past. Head mounted upon the September of Baelor's steps. Queen Cersei proclaims mercy upon traitors who lay down arms. Silence swallowed everything. Outside, men cursed balky mules, fires crackled, banners snapped. Inside, only the rasp of Robb's breathing. Catelyn's fingers trembled where she held the message. No trial, she whispered.
No concession.
They butchered him like a warning bell. Robb closed his eyes. For a moment he looked not lord nor wolf, but boy again in Winterfell's yard. Then he breathed once. Deep, open them. Ice lived behind that blue now. We answer in kind. Theon felt a chill slip beneath his cuirass. Yet he spoke. We answer, yes, but with strategy, not roar. Roar blinds. Your father deserves justice that endures beyond a single stroke. Robb's gaze darted to him, searing. You would counsel caution while his head rots in the sun? I counsel vengeance that does not consume its wielder, Theon replied, refusing to lower his voice. Strike now, and we charge 1,000 leagues to King's Landing with winter at our heels, our supply lines a thread. Tywin sits between us and the city like a wall of mailed fear. Break him first, break his spirit, and the capital may tip without siege. Gray wind rose, hackles lifting, sensing the fury. But Robb's stare shifted, from Theon's face to the maps, to the raven itself. Slowly, shoulders eased. Rage settled into shape like molten metal poured into a mold. Show me how, he said. Plans sprouted around those maps. Tendrils of ink winding across the riverlands. Edmure Tully would harry southward toward the Golden Tooth, baiting Tywin to pursue. Theon and Asha's flotilla, swollen now with Mallister cogs, would drive upriver, torch supply barges near Fairmarket. Robb himself would feint west, then will north to Sharer, forcing Tywin to split to defend his flank. Amid so many cuts, lion sinew might sever. Yet every scheme demanded trust across houses once sundered by distrust. Karstark, Umber, Blackwood, even Frey, and trust, like iron-born axes, dulled if left wet. Theon rode east to the twins with Lady Catelyn, each hoofbeat a drumroll upon tension-strung nerves. They crossed the misted field where the green fork ran brown and swift, and stood before twins of stone bridged by covered span. Walder Frey welcomed them with smiles that dripped like melting fat. He eyed Theon's kraken brooch. Tell me, Greyjoy, are you wolf or squid these days? Theon answered, both creatures possess teeth, my lord. I bite on Rob's behalf. Fry cackled, pleased at any implication of violence untied to his own name. Yet as they parleyed, Catelyn's patience measured, Theon silent by her side. Frey's eldest sons hawked, muttering at the kraken among them. Theon marked each face. The calculating stare of Ser Stevrin, the smirk of Black Walder. He felt what Ned Stark must have felt nursing vipers in the Vale. When terms were settled, passage in exchange for safe-kept hostages and one future marriage yet unspecified, Theon bowed but thought. A leash woven of wintergrass still strangles if left unwatched. Back at camp, he found Maester Luwin preparing leech poultices, his hands spotted with age under lamplight. The Maester smiled wearily. "My pupil returns adorned in politics," he said. "Adorned, perhaps, but not armored," Theon murmured. "Walder's courtesy tastes of cold soup." Luwin set aside the jar. "Courtesy is cracked pottery. Sometimes the water leaks, sometimes it holds long enough to drink. We must sip quickly." Theon almost laughed. "You taught Bran riddles sharper than any sword." "I taught Theon Greyjoy too." Luwin's gaze softened. "I am proud of the man he grows into." For a heartbeat, warmth banished the chill of frosted earth. Theon grasped the old maester's forearm in gratitude unspoken. Edmure's faint lured Tywin from Harrenhal as winter deepened. Snow fell more often than rain, blanketing supply columns, turning fords into slush traps. Theon's flotilla, cloaked in river mist, struck like wraiths. Fire arrows into grain barns, midnight boardings of tethered barges, quick retreats into reed-choked channels known only to Mallister pilots. Each raid cut another artery feeding Tywin's host, each torchlit plume across the water-seeded dread. Camp rumor christened Theon the River Kraken, a monster who roamed freshwaters with salt-blood fury. Some Lannister men deserted rather than guard stores within bowshot of reeds. Others spoke of a pact with old gods, that the Starks had given a seaborn demon shape to avenge Eddard's death. Theon welcomed the whispers. Fear traveled farther than any sail, yet gloaming triumph could not heal every wound. One night a scout dragged a captive before the king's brazier. A boy of 10, hair the color of honey wheat, bearing Jane Poole's livery. The lad sobbed, clutched a blood-spotted linen scrap. From him they learned Sansa Stark remained hostage in the Red Keep, forced to kneel before Joffrey's throne and watch her Lord Father's skull displayed. Theon watched Robb turn away, fists shaking. He felt the same storm boil within, black as Iron Island waves, but he also felt iron resolve clamp it. "Every terror they meet we must transform to strategy," he told Robb later, voice low. "When Tywin breaks, King's Landing will find itself friendless. Then we snatch your sister back with less blood than a blind assault would spill." Robb rubbed eyes red with fatigue. "You speak as though war were measured ledger, Theon." "It is," he said, "a ledger in lives, and we mean for ours to be in credit when the book closes." Grey wind nosed between them, whining. Theon knelt, pressing forehead to the direwolf's. "Guard him," he murmured. The beast's amber gaze seemed to flare in answer. Snow fogged the Trident Valley the morning Edmure struck Tywin's rearguard. Trumpets brayed, muffled by swirling flakes. Steel flashed in dull bursts. The battle lasted scarce 4 hours, but when sunweek noon filtered through cloud, Lannister banners lay trodden, their bright crimson darkened by mud and churned gore. Edmure rode hard for Sharer to rejoin Robb, and Tywin limped south with half his supply train ash in the wind. Theon watched the survivors pass. Gaunt faces, eyes sunken, stepping barefoot through crusted ice after discarding boots too soaked to warm. Some fell where they stood. Others dragged wounded comrades on broken shield sleds. He knew pity could dull one's hand, yet still his heart flickered. War, he thought, is a forge that melts every banner into the same color when heat grows fierce enough. That night, trumpets of their own sounded victory tones, but Theon paced the perimeter restless. Stars carved holes in cloud canopies, and through those wounds spilt cold moonlight. He paused at one campfire where Karstark men huddled, boasting of lion kills. A younger soldier poked at the flames, said, "'Tis near done, this war with Tywin in retreat. Near done means nothing until the cub Joffrey squeals, Theon answered. The soldier sneered. Easy for a Kraken prince to say. Your feet need not march all the way to the gates. Steel rasped faintly as Theon folded arms. My feet marched from Winterfell to Riverrun, from river to river, same as yours. He stepped closer, letting the light catch the wolf kraken on his breast. If you doubt my place, challenge me with sword at dawn. Otherwise, keep your mouth sheathed. Eyes widened. The soldier swallowed, muttered an apology. Theon left without further word, but as he walked, something in him ached. Not from insult, but from the ease with which he'd answered it. Identity, he feared, was a cloak that changed hues by necessity. Sooner or later, one might forget the original dye. Spring thaw would come late that year, but by first full moon of the new year, a fragile bloom of hope poked through ice. Scouts returned. King Renly rode north from Highgarden with an army vast as summer wheat, banners of rose and stag entwined. If Renly joined with Robb, the Lannisters would stand alone, outnumbered twofold. Robb dispatched Catelyn as envoy, Ser Brynden Tully at her side. Theon nearly volunteered, but Luwin urged him stay. Your name holds less sway at Storm's End than a north wind of ill omen. So Theon remained, drilling new levies, refining signal codes with Asha's captains, watching as Frey contingents approached. Late, sullen but vital, across the muddy causeways. They set camp in fields near the Green Fork, raising stripe and tower standards that flapped with impatience for reward. Theon greeted Ser Stevrin with measured courtesy, yet felt the undercurrent of contempt lapping at every exchange. One dusk, he found Black Walder sifting pebbles beside the river, skimming stones. Theon joined him, skipped a flat shard twice before it sank. Black Walder chuckled. Ironborn skip rocks like they skip oaths. 2 bounces, then to the muck. Theon's smile was thin. And Frey stones grow wings? I've yet to see one cross water unaided. The other man's hand strayed to dagger hilt. Theon mirrored the motion with calm deliberation. Seconds stretched. Then Black Walder tossed the remaining pebble high, turned away. His laughter drifted back. Careful, gray squid. This river feeds on pride. Theon watched him go, fingers still on dagger. Behind his gaze moved gears. Frey malice was seed of future rot. He must keep an eye sharp, or they'd gut the wolf from within. 2 weeks later, ravens proclaimed Renly Baratheon dead, slain beneath shadow of his own pavilion. His host fractured like ice underfoot. House Tyrell withdrew toward Highgarden. The Stormlanders split between Stannis and Doubt. The fragile bloom of hope Theon had nurtured crinkled black. Robb received the news in solemn council. By torchlight the parchment seemed to burn in his grasp, its wax seal weeping like blood. If the gods mock us further, he said, voice hoarse, they will set brother against brother, father against son. Theon spoke, steady. Let the gods mock, we answer with mortal hands. Tywin limps, King's Landing teeters. We strike the Westerlands, take their mines, deny their paymasters. Without gold, the throne's steel rusts. Roose Bolton murmured assent. Great John Umber bellowed for lion meat. Even cautious lords acquiesced. Better to march where supplies were ripe than chase ghosts down the King's Road. Only Rickard Karstark voiced misgiving, his thirst fixed on Jaime's capture in Riverrun, but Robb calmed him with promise of diplomatic ransom. When plans were laid, Theon found himself appointed to lead a diversionary raid along the crag, accompanied by Jory Castle's nephew Edric and Lady Sibel's garrison of archers. He clasped Robb's arm on the morning they parted. Your father's honor walks with me, he said. And my brother, Robb replied. Return whole, Theon, or I'll sail to the drowned god's hall to drag you back myself. They grinned, though eyes shone. The crag nestled against a cliff-swept bay, its curtain walls chalk-pale, glimmering in dawn haze like bone grown from the earth. Theon's fleet anchored beyond catapult range. Longships landed quietly on a stretch of shingle overlooked by twisted pines. Scouts garrote sentries stationed in lonely watch huts, then signaled for advance. Theon led the first wave, cloak wrapped tight, sword muffled in sealskin to prevent telltale clink. They moved through sea mist into Lower Town, where fisherfolk lay sleeping beneath patched roofs. He ordered no torches. Their mission was ransom, not ruin. Noble hostages fetched more than charred timber. Within the keep courtyard, guards played at dice by lantern. Asha's archers felled them before shouts could rise. Then steel whisper clashed, door hinges screamed. By sunrise, Lady Westerling and her children knelt captive while servants extinguished small fires set for distraction. Theon allowed no looting, save food and medical stores, and offered terms. Safe conduct in exchange for oaths of neutrality and provision of supplies. Lady Westerling, proud behind frightened facade, spat at his boots. You bargain with knives at throats. He bowed slightly. Knives cut fewer than battle. Swear, my lady, and your lands remain unburned, your coffers unplundered. Refuse, and I turn you over to Ironborn who remember only the taking, not the keeping. She paled, then nodded once. Quills scratched, seals impressed. Theon left garrisoned archers to hold the gate until Robb's main force advanced. As he strode back toward the quay, heart clanging with adrenaline, he pictured how Balan might have seized the crag. Slaughter, rape, torch, a legacy of salt and stone. He chose a different tide and wondered if the world would remember. But remembrance is a coin minted by survivors, and some carry counterfeit hearts. News met him by Raven mid-journey. Edmure Tully had fumbled defense of the fords, squandering troops to win a crossing that better served Robb unheld. In the chaos, Tywin's army slipped east toward King's Landing. Theon cursed beneath his breath, hands tightening on rail. War, it seemed, would never cease changing its rules. Yet darker parchment arrived hours later. Lord Rickard Karstark's grief, festering, had turned blade. He'd slain 2 captive squires of the Rock in vengeance for his sons, inside Robb's own camp. The king now faced judgment of a bannerman whose loyalty had become fracture. Theon shut his eyes, felt sea sway. Loyalty, he thought, is moat and bridge both. Defense until the moment it collapses beneath its own weight. He returned to Riverrun to find its courtyards cloaked not in snow, but in tension. Rickard Karstark sat bound near the Godswood, head bowed, gray hair stringy with rain. X-men stood ready. Robb paced before the block, face hollowed by sleepless nights. When Theon dismounted, the king's gaze rose. Relief flickered, then extinguished. I must pass the sentence, Robb said, voice like gravel. Lord Rickard killed boys whose only crime was their blood. Theon rested a hand on the young wolf's shoulder. Then do it, but know it makes a dozen of his men mortal enemies. I know, Robb swallowed. Every path now leads through shadow. So Robb swung ice, and Karstark's head thumped into wet leaves. Some watchers shouted approval. Others turned away. Theon felt neither triumph nor regret. Only the chill of another stone added to the cairn of necessary cruelties. That night, wine flowed to dull edges. Theon drank sparingly, choosing solitude near River Rampart. He traced ripples in torchlight, mind roving. Ned's death, Balan's wrath, Frey smirks, Tywin's cunning, Sansa's captivity, Bran and Rickon somewhere far in the north with wolves for guard. All threads entwined into a snare he feared even his sharpened wits might fail to cut. Bootsteps approached, light, measured. Asha leaned against the crenel, hair plastered by drizzle. Song of Steel grows tedious, she said. You brood like a crow on the mast. Crows still see land first, he replied. She offered a skin. He sipped. The liquor was fire and honey. Tell me, she said, if Robb falls, will you wear the crown that drifts? He shook his head. If Robb falls, the North falls. My crown is the duty I chose. She studied him, unreadable. You speak like a Stark in truth, yet Starks have a habit of losing their heads. Then I'll keep mine bolted, thank you. Asha laughed softly. Rain washed over them. The tumblestone rushed below like time made tide. By early summer, ravens brought word of wildfire searing the Blackwater. Stannis' fleet shattered, King's Landing still in Lannister clutches. Tywin, having escaped Robb's noose, arrived in time to crown victory with gold. Joff. Rey remained king. Sansa still hostage. Worse, Lord Roose Bolton, left to garrison Harrenhal, whispered of language with the crown, though no letters revealed terms. Theon met Robb in the grey gloom before dawn. If Bolton betrays, Robb cut him off. I will not believe it. Roose has served faithfully. Theon hesitated. So did Rickard once. We must prepare. Robb turned, eyes haunted. Trust keeps this cause alive. Lose it and we are sisterless wolves. So we watch with eyes open while we trust, Theon said gently. I will ride to Harrenhal. Bolton respects me. Iron to iron. I'll learn truth. A spy's cloak again? Robb managed a wry smile. An envoy's. Spies slink. I will walk through the gates at midday. Grey wind nudged Theon's thigh as if to lend approval. Theon scratched behind the wolf's ear, felt the rumble of contentment rumble like distant thunder. The road to Harrenhal wound through bog and ruin, where willows bent like mourners and the air stank of wet ash. Harrenhal itself loomed at dusk, towers melted, windows gaping hollow. Within that broken giant Roose Bolton greeted him with thin-lipped courtesy. Pink flayedman banners hung damp on blackened stone, stirring like flutters of skinned flesh. Bolton's eyes glimmered pale in torchlight. Theon Stark, he said, savoring each syllable as though tasting odd spice. Twice baptized, once in salt, once in snow. Baptism is easy, Theon replied. Living the faith proves harder. They supped on lean boar. Servants moved silent, faces bland. Bolton spoke of strategic arithmetic. Tywin's legions, Fry crossings, southern grain. Never once did he broach loyalty. Theon parried with pleasantries, but suspicion burrowed deeper with every polite exchange. That night, he slipped from guest chambers, hood drawn. Echoes haunted the corridors. Rats scuttled across slag-smooth flagstone. He followed murmurs to a side hall where lamplight leaked beneath a heavy door. Inside, Roose conversed with a man shrouded in maester's robes. Yet the chain at his throat glinted gold and red, colors of the rock. They spoke softly, but Theon caught phrases. In exchange for the young wolf's head, Riverrun unharried, north to ours, Fry support assured. His pulse roared. He retreated unseen, breath ragged against stone. Bolton, wrapping betrayal in courtesy just as Theon had feared. He must flee before dawn. But fate, ever hungry, gnawed. As Theon crossed a courtyard, armored figures emerged, Dreadfort men. Lord Bolton asks your presence, their captain said, expressionless. Theon feigned ignorance. At this hour? Now? The man insisted. He measured distance to the gate. Too far, watchers above with crossbows. So he followed, hand near dagger. They walked beneath archway into tower heart. Then a sudden clatter behind.
Theon spun, guards bloched retreat, blats baret.
Captain smiled thinly. Bolton's compliments. You will remain our guest until arrangements conclude. Theon drew steel, stepped back onto staircase narrow. 3 came at once. His blade rang, sparks spitting on stone. He parried a slash, kicked another man in shin. One guard crashed into railing. It cracked, and he plummeted screaming. Theon cut, thrust, felt edge-bite mail twist. Blood sprayed, but numbers pressed. A mace struck his shoulder, jolting arm numb. He staggered, vision flashing white. He slashed again, catching flesh. A dagger pierced his side, pain hot, blooming. He shoved the attacker against wall, yanked weapon free, turned, but the captain's sword hovered at his throat. Alive, the man hissed to the others. Bolton wants him alive. Theon's skull pounded. He spat blood. Tell your lord, Stark will know. That, the captain said, we intend to prevent. Darkness closed like seawater over sinking deck. He woke in a cell smelling of char and mold. Torchlight haloed Bolton's silhouette outside the bars. You force my hand, Roose said quietly. Rob's death buys peace for the North under my governance. You complicate symmetry. Theon sat, chains rattling, side aflame. Betrayal always fashions itself righteous, he said through clenched teeth. What price did the lion name? Independence, Bolton replied, as if discussing weather. And Winterfell when time ripens. He stepped closer, eyes shark pale. Renounce your wolf pelt. Declare for House Bolton, and you may yet rule the stony shore with my sigil overhead. Theon laughed. A raw crack sound. Trade one leash for another? Keep your flayers. Bolton's mouth curved faintly. Then you kneel in chains until the towers fall. He turned, cloak whispering. Footsteps receded. Theon's head slumped against stone. Pain shimmered, but beyond it burned a cold purpose. Escape, warn Rob, strip the flayed man's skin from his treason. He tested the shackles. Forged well, yet the wall ring holding them rusted from years of rain creeping through stone. He worked at it, fingers slippery with his own blood. Hours crawled. Footsteps crossed corridors elsewhere, guards changing. Each sound sent his heart hammering. Finally, with a creak soft as breath, the ring shifted. He pulled, braced feet, strained until muscles trembled. A final crack and the iron tore free, leaving jagged stub protruding. He caught it, careful not to clang. Chains still bound wrists but granted short reach. He patted to door. Hinge pins lay exposed. Using the ring's spit-sharp edge, he slipped beneath the pin, levering. Sweat stung eyes. At length the pin rose enough to grasp. He eased it free, repeated lower. The door, now unmoored, sagged. He wedged ring into gap, pried outward, inch two. Light spilled. He froze, no shouts. He slipped through, boots silent on damp floor. Corridor split left toward storeroom smell, right toward torch glow. He crept left. Found racks of spears, a half-empty mead barrel, sackcloths. He seized a dagger, cut wrist manacles loose. Blood oozed from reopened wound, but freedom sang through veins. Backtracking, he encountered two guards chatting near stairwell. He waited for laughter to drown his step, then lunged. Dagger across throat. One fell gurgling. Second tried to cry out, but Theon rammed him into wall, pommel to temple. He slid boneless. He donned the man's cloak, hid face in hood, up spiral stairs, heart counting each turn, until he emerged in courtyard bathed in pre-dawn gray. Snow skittered on paving. A gatehouse yawned ahead, portcullis half raised as wagons prepared for day delivery. He kept stride even, passing a sleepy undercaptain scribbling parchment. Beyond, horses stamped at hitching post. He untied a dun gelding, swung astride. A call sounded. Someone noticed? He dug heels. The horse leapt, hooves clattering over drawbridge planks. Arrows hissed. The air cracked near his ear. He flattened, spurred faster. Marshland opened, mist cloaking pursuit. Behind, Harrenhal's silhouette faded, and with it any last flicker that war might spare honor without vigilance. He rode until dusk, wound weeping through improvised bandage. At a riverside fisher hut he barged in, collapsed. A gray-haired woman shrieked, but he offered silver, begged refuge. She stitched the gash with trembling hands, muttering prayers. That night Theon lay on straw pallet, feverish, yet mind-carving message he must deliver. Bolton, Fry, Lion, web tightening. Tomorrow he'd ride again, north to Riverrun, to warn the king he called brother. But tomorrow bore storms unseen, and ravens already winged through dusk, bearing false words sharper than any spear. In camps along the Twins, musicians tuned strings for a wedding's cheer. Cooks basted pheasant with honey, and somewhere, in halls of cold gray stone, a mother prayed for all her children to live until dawn. Theon drifted to half-sleep, hearing the river lap. He clutched the wolf-kraken brooch in fist, vowed silently, I will reach him. I will not fail. Outside, night gathered strength, and far away the first cruel chords of betrayal began their silent prelude. Snowmelt hissed as it met the smoldering ash of the small hearth, each faint plume of steam fading into the dark rafters of the fisherwoman's hut. Theon woke to the taste of salt and copper on his tongue, his side throbbing with a deep, dull ache that echoed his heartbeat. Outside, the first bruised colors of dawn seeped through low clouds. Sleet rattled against the shutters like impatient knuckles. He pushed upright, breath ragged, and felt the rough pull of fresh stitches beneath the linen wrap. Memory returned in staggered strokes. Bolton's offer, the flare of torchlight on a hidden maester's chain, the clash on Harrenhal's stairs, the flight into the marshes. The woman, he had since learned her name was Mora, rose from a stool and pressed a clay cup into his hands. Onion broth, thin and hot. "Keep still," she warned. "Riding to Dale split you anew." "I ride or I doom a king," he croaked, throat raw. He downed the broth. It scalded comfort through chilled guts. Mora shook her head, gray braids swinging. "He'll not thank you if you bleed out at his feet." Theon managed a grim smile. "He'll thank me less if a flayed wolf hangs from Bolton's walls." He forced himself to stand, wavering until the room steadied. Armor and cloak lay beside the pallet, cleaned of caked blood. Mora had even fixed the torn seam at the shoulder. He tucked 2 silver stags into her palm. She tried to refuse, but he closed her fingers over the coins. "For the needle," he said, "and the silence." She pressed knuckles to her lips, then opened the door. Gray light and river mist swirled in, carrying the scent of damp reeds. The gelding he'd stolen, now named Chance by need, stamped and wickered nearby, reins looped over a post. Theon cinched his sword belt, ignoring the fresh seep of warmth under the bandage, and swung up into the saddle. Mora watched him a long moment. "Straight east, till you reach the old stone way," she called above the snap of wind. "Avoid the high road. Lannister patrols ride it." She lifted a weather-cracked hand in farewell. Hooves splashed through rutted mud as he guided Chance along a deer track. Freezing drizzle needled his cheeks, but each mile placed another narrow stream or willow copse between him and Bolton's hunters. By mid-morning, the marshes yielded to low hills tufted with iron grass, the sky clearing to a thin glare that pried color from the world. Theon rode hunched, one hand pressed to his side, yet his mind raced ahead. He pictured Robb's camp near the Twins, banners whipping bright over muddy fields, the uneasy truce with Fry men who shuffled cards of resentment. He prayed the king had not marched already. If Bolton's raven arrived first, its lies could seal doom. Toward noon he spied a smoke column, a wayfarer's fire, curling above a copse. He slowed, senses pricking. 2 riders emerged, mottled cloaks flapping, helms rimed with frost. Gold and crimson trimmed their surcoats. Lannister outriders. Theon cursed under breath. To veer wide across the open would draw their notice. To ride straight invited challenge. Chance snorted, as though sharing opinion on the matter. Theon nudged the gelding toward a stand of hawthorn. The thicket scratched his leggings but sheltered him from the rider's direct sight. Through branches he watched them halt at the copse, dismount, and stamp warmth into chilled feet. One bent to the fire while the other paced a line, scanning the horizon with bored disdain. 2 against 1, a poor wager yet capture worse. He considered slipping past while they ate, but a breaking twig betrayed him. The pacing knight wheeled, eyes narrowing. "You there, halt!" Steel hissed free. Theon kicked heels. Chance bolted from hiding, splintering twigs. Arrows whistled. One thudded into a branch, another sailed wide. Theon crouched low over the mane, pain flaring down his ribs. Behind, hoofs crushed frost, pursuit begun. The hills rolled, offering no quick cover. He angled for a line of standing stones half-shrouded in snow. Shafts flew, snapping past ear and saddle. Ahead, between 2 boulders, a narrow defile plunged steeply toward a frozen brook. Theon steered in, hoping the rocky twist would slow heavier destriers. Chance skidded on scree, regained footing, plunged down. Hoofbeats clattered against stone walls mere lengths behind. A bend. The defile narrowed further, barely shoulder-wide. Theon swung from the saddle mid-stride, slapped Chance's flank. "Fly!" The gelding lunged ahead, riderless, spooking the enemy horses. Theon pressed himself flat against the rock face, scarcely daring breath. The first Lannister galloped past, cursing after the fleeing mount. The second followed before either thought to look aside. Moments stretched, heart hammered. He peered around. The knights vanished over the slope, chasing empty reins. Theon exhaled, then began careful ascent opposite the path, boots finding hidden notches. Every pull on the stone sent spears of fire through stitched flesh, but within minutes he crested the ridge. Below, the road curved north-northwest toward the Fry Causeways. Luck for once had not fled. Without horse, travel slowed to a painful trudge. Snowflakes drifted, bright against drab heather, and wind sawed his cloak. He wrapped arms across chest, leaning into gusts, feet numbed, then burned as circulation fought cold. He chewed dried salt pork for strength, though each swallow rasped a throat parched by fear and wind. That night he found an abandoned charcoal burner's hut. Inside, charred logs lay in a mound. He coaxed embers from flint and frosted twigs, huddled close, teeth clacking. Dreams came fitful. Ned Stark smiling from Winterfell's ramparts, then losing his smile and his head in King's Landing sun. Robb crowned in a river hall, then drowning under red water, gray wind howling at moons that bled. He woke before dawn, sweat glazing chilled skin. The second day he struck the old stone way, grooves of countless carts etched into frozen ground. Will ruts guided him like rails. At an hour past midday, distant banners rippled above the swale. Pale blue with gray towers, Fry outriders. Relief mingled with dread. He raised empty hands, stumbling forward. One rider spurred ahead, spear leveled. "I carry message for King Robb," Theon called. "Treason within his ranks. Take me to him or damn us all." They bound his wrists, not cruelly, and placed him on a dun mare. Hooves drummed a steady cadence. Soon the swelling shape of the twins emerged. Twin castles bristling with turrets, the bridged span between arching over a churn of brown winter water. Around the southern keep sprawled a city of tents. Stark Direwolf, Karstark Sunburst, Mallister Eagle, Manderly Merman, and the pink flayed man of House Bolton. Seeing those banners flutter among the rest chilled Theon worse than any wind. The guards led him through muddy lanes where cook fires smoked and smith hammers rang. Soldiers glanced up, some with curiosity, others with narrowed suspicion. The Kraken come again. He ignored them, fixing gaze on the largest pavilion at the camp's heart. The king's tent, stitched of thick gray wool, direwolf sigil snarling against canvas. Gray wind lounged at its entrance, muzzle resting on paws. The great wolf's head rose as they approached, golden eyes fixed on Theon, recognition sparking. A low rumble vibrated in its throat, half warning, half welcome. Robb stepped out, cloak of shaggy fur clasped with bronze. He looked wearier still, cheeks hollowed, beard untended, but his eyes widened. "Theon," he crossed in 2 strides, seized his friend's shoulders. "By the gods, where have you been?" "Bolton," Theon rasped. "He conspires with Freys and lions both." Words tumbled as guards cut his bonds. He told of Harrenhal, the secret parley, the ambush, the wound, and of Roos's promise to trade Robb's life for dominion of the North. Robb's face hardened line by line, jaw flexing. "My mother must hear." He ushered Theon inside. The tent smelled of damp wool and smoke. Catelyn Stark sat at a trestle table, quill in hand, writing by guttering lantern. Black circles framed her eyes. She rose sharply when she saw him. "Theon Greyjoy," she breathed, torn between relief and fresh alarm. He bowed, pain lancing through side. "My lady, I bring dire tidings." He repeated the tale, slower, details laid bare. By the end, Catelyn's hand covered her mouth. Robb paced, fists clenched. "I trusted him with Harrenhal," Robb muttered. "And with men." "Bolton moves under cloak of courtesy," Catelyn said, voice thin. "He will strike where least expected." "Here," Theon said, "among Freys." He recounted the gold and red chain around the maester's neck, the promises of Fry support. Caitlyn's eyes widened anew. "The wedding," she whispered. Rob frowned. "Edmure's match." Caitlyn nodded. "Lord Walder insists stoutly on hospitality and vows. If Bolton has turned, he may use the wedding feast as snare." Rob exhaled a shaky breath. "We cannot affront Lord Walder by refusing the rites. Half our host already feasts in his hall. Nor can we walk unguarded into a butcher's den," Theon said. He saw Rob's mind were weighing honor against survival. Theon stepped closer. "Invite Walder here instead. Reverse the board. Hold the nuptials within our camp. Cite your friend's wound. A stark wedding gift of healing hearth. Walder's pride will balk, but if he consents, the weapon turns dull. If he refuses, the mask drops." Caitlyn considered. "Stark men hold these grounds, but Freys control the bridge. They could still close it behind us, starve us of fresh stores. Then we must hold both banks," Rob said. "Send Manderley across with half his spears. Surround the keep with goodwill." Despite the tense moment, a flicker of grim humor touched his eyes. "Lord Walder likes gifts. Let him taste our generosity from every direction." Plans unfurled quick as banners. Messages to commanders, riders dispatched, codes for signal fires along both banks. A quiet order to disarm Fry guards entering camp for the celebratory hunts. Caitlyn penned a courteous note to the Lord of the Crossing expressing concern for Theon's grave injury and suggesting joyous proceedings be relocated where the maester could tend him. A small lie, but not dishonor, she insisted. Rob owed his friend's life consideration. As ravens lifted into the pewter sky, Theon sank onto a bench, exhaustion washing over him. Gray wind patted close, sniffed his bandaged side, then rested his massive head against Theon's knee. A gesture of trust that warmed him deeper than any hearth. He scratched behind the wolf's ear, murmuring thanks no human tongue could phrase. Hours later, Walder's reply arrived. Grudging acceptance, larded with backhanded compliments and demands. He would attend, with a reduced retinue for ease of accommodation. Rob read the scroll, lips thin. "A lesser host, yet enough daggers and sleeves," he said. "We shall watch those sleeves," Theon answered. "And Bolton's." Night fell, and the camp bloomed golden with lanterns. Tents were repitched nearer the riverbank, forming semicircles, meant to appear festive, yet arranged for defense. Archers took stations inside pavilions disguised as alehouses. Spear racks stood hidden behind supply crates. Stark men rehearsed a silent drill. 1 horn blast for toast, 3 for treachery. Even the musicians, hired from White Harbor, were briefed which strings to pluck should blood spill mid-melody. Theon oversaw placements with Asha at his side, her quick eye spotting gaps in the ring. "We surround them like clams in stew," she said. "Yet must remember clams carry pearls and knives." He chuckled despite nerves. "Then we shuck. Gently." On the eve of the feast, wagons bearing Fry daughters and sons rolled across the pontoon. Walder did not accompany, a stimulus for suspicion, but his eldest, Ser Stevrin, led the column. Grooms escorted barrels of ale, bolts of embroidered cloth, cages of doves. At the gate, Stark sergeants searched each wagon politely but thoroughly. Stevrin's smirk never wavered, yet his knuckles whitened when a chest of wedding favors revealed not daggers but only ribbons. Inside the largest pavilion, a hastily raised hall of timber poles and snowy canvas. Tables groaned with trenchers of boar, pigeon pies studded with bacon, wheels of goat cheese. River trout roasted whole, mouth stuffed with onion and dill. Manderley cooks had worked through the night. Their white-mustached lord strode between cauldrons like a gleeful walrus, sampling for poison before any Fry tongue could claim insult. Theon sat at Rob's right toward the dais. Across, Stevrin's watery eyes flitted from plate to door. Beside him, Black Walder picked at roast capon. Bolton arrived last, face impassive, pale eyes glinting. He bowed with slow elegance. "Your Grace," he murmured. Rob's answering nod was equally chilly. "Lord Bolton." I trust Harrenhal fares well. It holds, Bolton said. Stone endures. His gaze brushed Theon's bandage. I mourn the attack upon your retinue, my lord. Bandits? War makes vermin bold. Theon held that gaze. Vermin seldom wear flayed men on their shields. Bolton's mouth quirked an inch. Indeed, music swelled lutes, pipes, the steady beat of a drum. Edmure Tully, groom in hastily tailored doublet, clutched the hand of Rosy Cella Fry, whose shy smile seemed genuine despite the undercurrent of unease. When they reached the dais, Robb lifted a silver goblet, recited words of welcome. Cups clinked throughout the hall. The feast began. Conversation flowed like mead, but tension coiled beneath each laugh. Theon watched Bolton from the corner of his eye. The man ate sparingly, drank less, his gaze flicking toward entrances, windows, corners where shadows pooled. Stevrin, too, dispatched servants often. Whispers behind napkins, nods exchanged. Yet each time a message trader tried to leave, a stark man gently intercepted, guiding them instead to ale kegs under pretense of refills. Midway through the third course, the wedding pie of sweet widgeon and candied nuts, the door flap rustled. 2 Fry escorts stumbled in, supporting a cloaked figure. Hood thrown back revealed Lord Walder himself, cheeks flushed with cold and perhaps anger at inconvenience. A late arrival, he cackled, voice carrying. But weddings wait for the bride's father. Robb rose cordial. Lord Walder, your presence honors. Walder's narrow eyes glittered. Honor I and hunger. Seat me before the pigeon bones pick themselves. He took place near Stevrin. His gaze swept the arrangement, lingering on posted guards, the strategic spacing of tables. A frown puckered his brow. Caitlin, sitting near the wedded couple, lifted her goblet. May this union mend the hurts of war, she said. May rivers and towers stand stalwart beside wolves. A polite murmur answered. Walder only sniffed. Dancers spun. A circle of girls in pale gowns, their braids flying. Fiddles screeched merry jigs, but underpinning each trill Theon sensed drumbeats like war horses. His hand strayed to dagger hilt. He noticed a subtle shift. Bolton leaned toward Walder. Words whispered. Walder's back stiffened. Bolton's hand reached inside sleeve, only to withdraw a folded parchment which he slid beneath the Lord's trencher. Walder glanced at the sealed sheet, then at Bolton's unreadable face. Whatever message lay within, it did not please him. Lines deepened around his mouth. He tapped knuckles on table 3 times, sharp. Half across the hall, a Fry servant moved, but a stark guard stepped in, blocking path. The servant paled, stammered excuses. The guard guided him toward latrine tents outside, accompanied by 2 bowmen. Bolton's eyes narrowed fractionally. Walder's gaze flicked to Black Walder, who shrugged in exaggerated confusion. The conspiracy sagged under watchful cords. Theon felt tension slip a notch. Nearby, the White Harbor musicians shifted tune to a softer air, a northern lullaby adapted to wedding pace. Couples joined hands. Robb offered his to Queen Talisa. He had wed her months prior despite Fry contract, increasing the stakes of tonight's truce. She smiled, rising, her belly already rounding with child. Stark and Valentine swayed to the melody. Eyes softened across the hall. Theon exhaled, daring hope. Yet as he scanned benches, he caught Bolton staring. Not at Robb, but at Talisa's stomach. Something cold slithered up Theon's spine. Bolton's long fingers drummed once on the table. Then he pushed back his chair. "Excuse me," he murmured to no one, drifting toward a side exit. Theon's muscles coiled. He rose. Gray wind lifted his great head near the dais, ears flattening. Robb's dance slowed, noticing his friend's alarm. Theon followed Bolton, weaving through guests. Beyond the canvas flap, chill night air sucked warmth from his lungs. Torches guttered in iron poles. Bolton strode toward the riverbank where a row of wagons sat under tarps. No guards nearby awed. Theon crept between barrels until he stood behind a wagon's shadow, watching. Bolton stopped at the rear of one cart, lifted canvas. Inside lay casks labeled Dornish red. He tapped a code knock on one barrel, two short, one long. The lid shifted, revealing not wine but bundles of crossbows and coral sacks. Thick grease smeared across steel to muffle clack of mechanisms. Bolton replaced lid, retied canvas, and turned, eyes locking on Theon's silhouette. They stared, breath misting. "You lack subtlety," Bolton said softly. "I lacked patience," Theon replied. He drew dagger. "Call this off." Bolton smiled thinly. "Walder's reluctance has already unraveled the design. But make no mistake, another loom stands ready." He stepped forward into torchlight, revealing no weapon but the calm of a spider. "You choose wolves over krakens, over flayers. Admirable. But you tether yourself to a pup who gambles kingdom for love." His gaze flicked to Pavilion. "There is no victory in that romance." "There is honor," Theon said.
Honor.
Bolton's voice barely rose above river whisper.
Honor feeds no armies.
"Gold does. Fear does. And you will have both, until someone braver cuts your throat." Bolton inclined head. "Perhaps." His eyes glinted. "But not tonight, I think." Bootsteps crunched behind Theon. He risked glance. Stark guards, alerted perhaps by gray wind's unrest, bows knocked. Bolton lifted palms casually. "I was ensuring Lord Walder's gifts remained secure," he said. "A dutiful host, even here." Theon gestured. "Search the wagons." Guards obliged, hauling casks down. When crossbows came into view, their curses split the night. One turned to Bolton, sword half drawn. Theon shook head. "Hold." He pinned Bolton with gaze. "My king will decide." They marched Roos between spearpoints back toward the pavilion. Inside, song still drifted, though tension vibrated like a drawn harpstring as Robb noticed the file of armed men entering. Conversation stilled. Walder's beady eyes flicked to Bolton, then the uncovered crossbow in a guard's hand. Understanding dawned. Caitlin stood slowly, face pale. "Lord Bolton, explain these weapons." Roos's expression hardly changed. "My lady, I feared Lannister treachery even here. Prepared defense unseen to spare panic." Walder coughed a wet laugh. "Defense," he says, "hidden in barrels like mummers." Guests murmured. Robb stepped forward. "You hid arms in my camp without leave." His voice shook with anger held in check. "Guards will escort you to quarters under watch." Bolton's eyes flicked once to Theon, a glimmer of something, respect or promised vengeance. Then he inclined head. "As you command, your grace." He allowed himself to be led away, silent as snowfall. Walder rose, leaning on gnarled cane. "See what trust is worth, boy? Rats scurrying from your own cupboards." He bared yellowed teeth. "Yet still you broke oath to my house." Robb's jaw tightened. "I came to make amends. My uncle weds your daughter, honored before all. Blood need not answer blood." Walder snorted. "Blood answers coin, in truth." He sat again, waved for wine. "We shall drink to this near calamity, shall we not?" His gaze lingered on Theon. "And to swift eyes." The feast limped onward, but merriment wore a cracked mask. Bolton's men were disarmed, corralled under guard. Fry soldiers, though fewer, eyed exits warily. The subtle shift Theon had felt earlier became overt. The hall now belonged unmistakably to wolves. After last course, a spiced apple custard nearly untouched, guests retired to assigned tents. Robb met Theon near the main fire, sparks rising into night. "You saved us," he said quietly. "Twice now." "I served you," Theon corrected. "Bolton will not cease. Nor Walder. They will send ravens to Tywin before dawn." "Let them." Robb's eyes burned. "Come morning, Lord Walder and I negotiate anew, with truth laid bare." Theon nodded, though fatigue weighted eyelids. "I will watch the bridge." Gray wind joined him, silent shadow at heel, as he crossed frost-silvered grass to the causeway. Guards saluted, he took place by parapet. River churned black beneath, faint moon shards caught in eddies. Across, the southern keep loomed, torches flickering in arrow loops. Mid-watch, soft footfalls approached. Arya Stark, now grown wiry and tall as his shoulder, leaned on the stone next to him. "They say you wrestled a flayed man with words," she said. He smiled. "Words bite if sharpened." She studied him. "Father trusted you once. I think he would again." Wind tugged at her dark hair. "Do you trust yourself?" Theon looked down at River. "Some days. Others I tie knots and pull until they hold." He glanced at her. "Keep your sword ready, little wolf." "I'm not little," she said, but her grin flashed. Dawn seeped over horizon, a pale burnishing of clouds. Trumpets called assembly. Theon left Arya on parapet and returned to the camp's heart where Robb, armored, stood before ranks. Lord Walder approached between Fry bannermen, his cane tapping frost. Bolton, hands bound, was escorted behind. Robb's voice rang. "Lord Walder, for conspiring with enemies of my house, for arming men under false tokens, you stand accused of treachery. Yet in respect for old oaths and new marriage, I offer choice. Renew fealty, surrender 3 hostages of your blood to ensure honor, or stand declared foe, your bridge forfeit." Gasps rippled. Walder's face contorted. "You threaten the crossing itself?" "I threaten only traitors," Robb answered. Walder's gaze flicked to Bolton, who watched impassively. He weighed survival against pride. At length he bowed, the motion slight, stiff. "Take my grandson, my niece, and my 4th son as token. The bridge remains yours, King in the North." Venom laced each syllable. Robb nodded to guards. "Escort Lord Walder to feast with Manderley. Treat him well." Bolton was hauled before the assembly. Robb's voice fell cold. "Roose Bolton, you sought my death in secret and bartered the North for gold. For that, I judge you guilty of high treason." Bolton met his gaze. "Mercy is a king's privilege. Stark mercy was given at Whispering Wood," Robb said. "This is justice." He drew blade. Light winked along steel. Yet before he could step forward, Caitlin touched his arm. "My son," she murmured. "Let not vengeance rule. A lord's head is heavy coin. Hold him prisoner. His seat now, his life later." Robb hesitated, war within his eyes. At last he lowered sword. "Take him to Riverrun cells," he ordered. "Under Karstark guard." Bolton's lips curved almost imperceptibly, relief or amusement. Theon watched, uneasy. Had mercy planted another seed of threat? Yet the king had chosen constraint. Theon would honor it. As Bolton was dragged away, gray wind snarled deep. Theon laid a hand on the wolf's scruff. "Soon," he whispered. "If he slips chain again, we bite." War drums ceased that morning, replaced by bustle of moving tents across the bridge, repairing trust, fortifying banks. Caitlin oversaw dismissal of Fry retainers save the 3 hostages, who dined under polite guard. Edmure and Chella were sent to Riverrun with escort, their union now symbol of tenuous accord. Ravens flew, Stark missives to White Harbor, Bear Island, even Pike, seeking ships for a push toward the western shore. None flew to King's Landing yet. Secrecy served them better than boasts. Theon spent days mapping supply routes, nights on ramparts with Arya sparring wooden blades. His side mended slowly, the scar tugged tight beneath fresh linen. Asha prepared her fleet for spring thaw, promising to harry Lannisport hard enough to make Casterly Rock squeal. Lord Manderley drilled men in shield wall on the eastern bank, his booming laughter echoing across the water. One dusky evening, Theon encountered Sansa, newly arrived under ransom exchange, escorted from King's Landing after heavy coin and 2 Lannister cousins captured at Stone Mill. She stood outside a healing tent, pale but straight, watching campfires with wide blue eyes. When she saw him, surprise softened into cautious warmth. "I heard you guarded Robb from treachery," she said, voice barely above crackle of flames. He inclined head. "I merely returned favor owed your house." She clasped hands, gaze dropping to his scar. "Father believed you good at heart." Her eyes lifted. "I should as well." A simple sentence, yet it rang through him louder than trumpets. Days stretched into thaw. Ice cracked on the river, carrying shards downstream like broken mirrors. Scouts reported Tywin massing west, but slowed by raids. His coffers bled to fund new levies. Within the twins' walls, Frey banners now flew beneath Stark with faint resentment. But Walder abided terms, bridged by fear of hostage fate. One cold dawn, Robb called council under a blooming red dawn. Maps sprawled over table, cups of black tea steaming. Theon leaned on good elbow while Manderly traced coastlines. "We strike at the Golden Tooth come midsummer," the Lord boomed. Mallister sails cut supply from south, Asha claws from sea. Lions starve inside their gold cage. Robb nodded. The North marches. Theon felt a flame kindle. Hope, tempered by scars but alive. Later, alone beneath leafless oak, he opened a small parchment he'd kept since Mora's hut. The fisherwoman had slipped it between his bandage folds. On it, simple words in smudged ink. "Truth cuts nets. Swim deep." He folded it, tucking into pouch beside the wolf-kraken brooch. The river hissed beyond embankment. Geese honked overhead. He watched them carve the sky, free of banners, and wondered what songs the bards might one day sing of this tangled war. Perhaps they would name Theon Stark a bridge between tides, or perhaps only another drowned man who grasped at honor. The song was unfinished. He would write verse by verse, blade by blade, breath by breath. He turned back toward camp, where tents glowed lantern-lit against early dusk, where wolves walked beside men and ironborn guarded walls of snow. The path ahead wound long, strewn with treachery yet. But for the first time since leaving Pike's jagged towers, he felt the horizon widen rather than close. Somewhere beyond lay Winterfell, battered but still rooted in ancient granite. Beyond that, seas whose salt would sting yet never drown the man he'd become. And so Theon set his stride, cloak snapping in northern wind, his scar aching clean beneath healing flesh, ready to march with brothers under rising banners toward whatever dawn war would permit.